Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to review the third episode of the first season of WandaVision. So let's get right into it. It's hard to do, I want to say the basic plot synopsis of this episode is XYZ, but so far this show isn't set up where you could say there's a basic premise from episode to episode, because the premise of the series is just being explored from episode to episode in sort of one continuous story without any particular, changes to location or mission, quote unquote, as it were, of the characters, what they're trying to achieve. So the premise is ongoing, and the ongoing premise is that Wanda and Vision seem to be living in some kind of a fake universe, in some kind of a fantasy. Vision, of course, being back from the dead. So that's the setting that we're dealing with so far from episode to episode. The title of this episode was Now in Color, which is a reference to the fact that the show is now in color, where it wasn't for the first two episodes except for the end. And the phrase now in color, of course, comes from the days when TV shows were first in color after having been in black and white. Shows like Gunsmoke, Lost in Space, I believe Bonanza. I think Gunsmoke was in black and white originally. Lost in Space definitely was. So that's why they called it that. They are still also using the old aspect ratio here, which I think is great because it just helps you sort of feel like you're in that time as you're watching the show. It just adds legitimacy sort of to the presentation. It's immersive. The cool thing is that they're using, I guess they were doing this a bit in the previous episodes too, as far as how the sets looked, but in this case, it's more noticeable, at least to people from my generation, because we remember the Brady Bunch. They're using a set that resembles the Brady Bunch. The color scheme that they're using, the stairs that they're using in this episode, even though they're sort of differently placed in terms of where they are on screen. The doors, the entrance door to the house that Wanda and Vision are living in are the same setup as on the Brady Bunch. I believe the door handles are the same exact, ones, not the same exact ones, but replicas of the same ones. So that's pretty cool. Right away in this episode, we're dealing with the fact that Vision is now an expectant father, as Wanda is pregnant as of the end of the previous episode. And they are being visited by a doctor who lives in the neighborhood, and he's sort of just saying, you're coming along and so forth, and you're so far along. And Vision's trying to grasp it because he knows it was only moments ago or hours ago that she wasn't pregnant. So that is a cause for some sort of alarm on his part. But he's trying to carry on and not make an issue of it. And he goes outside and he's talking to his neighbor, and his neighbor is like trimming the hedges with a hedge trimmer, but he starts slicing the cinder block wall between their properties with his hedge trimmer and doesn't seem to realize he's doing it, or does realize he's doing it and is pretending like it's normal. And Vision's kind of looking at him like, what are you doing? So that brought to mind the fact that both he and Wanda are noticing things. Now, we saw this before, but it just reinforces that they're both sort of noticing that things are weird, because she noticed the beekeeper, she noticed the helicopter, she noticed what was happening with the radio. So at least it's not something that only one of them is seeing, which would be kind of weird. They're both seeing it. Of course, the pregnancy moves very quickly, and that makes it even weirder. And they talk about names, and the names Tommy and Billy come up, names for the children, which are the names of Wanda's children with Vision from the comic. So from House of M, I think, and from other stories in the Marvel comics. So that was cool. At one point, Wanda stops Vision from talking about something being wrong, even though, as we said a moment ago, they're both noticing things. Like, he goes to her and he starts to say, okay, something seems not right. And she just pulls a Samantha on him, like on Bewitched, as she's done previously in other situations on the show, and stops him from talking about it. Like she just stops it like she's watching a movie and does a rewind and lets it run forward again, and then he doesn't bring it up. So she clearly knows there's something hokey going on between the things she's noticing herself and the fact that other people are noticing things. And so she just doesn't want to deal with it. And that's how I know that this is her doing all this, because she's doing everything she can to perpetuate what's happening without, having to face it, without it having to come down around her. They did another fake commercial for a fake product. This time it was Hydra soap, or Hydra soak rather, which I guess is like a bath bomb type of thing. Kind of weird. At one point, he's again talking to Vision, is again talking to the doctor, I think it was. Yeah, when the doctor leaves the house, that's right, they have a conversation. And he's, is it the doctor? I'm gonna have to check now. Anyway, he's talking to either the doctor or one of the neighbors, and they're talking about how they're going on vacation. And he says, he's really looking forward to it. And he just looks at Vision and says, "It's so hard to escape." And, in a normal conversation between people who aren't trapped in a fantasy simulation, when you would have a conversation like that, you'd be referring to how, it's hard to get away from your responsibilities at work or at home to take a vacation or a break. But in this case, it's a double entendre, because he's really talking about the fact that they're all trapped in this, fake universe. It's kind of like that vignette that was in the Twilight Zone movie where the kid is controlling everything that goes on in the house, and everybody knows it's fucked up, but they can't say anything because the kid wants to pretend everything's normal, and they all just sort of cater to him and don't say boo about anything crazy that's going on. So this is the same kind of thing. They all know it's crazy, but they can't say anything. They're afraid of what will happen. Then there's another scene where Wanda's neighbor comes over, the character that she was talking to at the talent show planning meeting in one of the previous two episodes. The woman she was talking to when she was scolded by the host of the meeting for chit-chatting. And Wanda says to her, sort of with a blank look on her face as she's staring off into the distance, "I'm a twin," of course referring to her brother Quicksilver. And the woman makes a mistake and says, "Oh, that's right, he was killed by Ultron." And so this does not sit well with Wanda. She, it's kind of a trigger, and she gets very upset, and she tells the woman to leave. She starts questioning who she is and so forth. We in the audience know that she is the Monica Rambeau version of Captain Marvel from Marvel Comics. But Wanda doesn't know that, so she's questioning her, as to who she is. And so she basically expels her from the fantasy pocket that she's created. She expels her from, I guess it's Westview. And you see her flying through this force field and landing in a field somewhere surrounded by what I guess is all kinds of people and apparatus from S.W.O.R.D. And the aspect ratio changes. It goes to a widescreen format because now we're in the real world. We're no longer in the bubble for this scene. So it's really cool how they do that, and they're making sure that they stick to that aspect ratio only for the bubble, so that okay, that's the fake world and this is the real world. Not that we wouldn't know it, but they're drawing a great distinction visually without saying anything in a lot of ways, and that's one of them. And I think that's great. That pretty much ends the episode, and the credits roll, and the song that they play over the credits was "Daydream Believer" by the Monkees. And a lot of the lyrics probably don't make sense compared to what's going on in the show, but the takeaway from that is that it's like a daydream. It's a fantasy world, that she's living in. She's a daydream believer, or wants to be. so that she can believe in her own universe or continue to manifest her own universe the way she wants it. So that's another little, you know, I don't want to say hint because it's not a mystery what's going on really, but it's another sort of reference to the fact that this is all fake. And I think that's really cool. I don't know how I didn't notice it with the first 2 episodes, because the watch time of the first 2 episodes back to back, the day the show premiered, was only about an hour, meaning that each episode was only a half hour. I didn't notice it somehow, but I noticed that this episode was only a half hour. And when a half hour was up and the episode ended, I was like, that's it. That's all we get. I want more. But I have to wait till next week. So yeah, I don't know why they did that. It's a 9-episode season. So that's 270 minutes. So 240 minutes is 4 hours. So it's 4.5 hours, you know, the whole season, which is like, 1.5 Marvel Universe movies. They tend to run like 3 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes, or whatever it is. So yeah, I thought that was a little weird. I don't know why they just didn't have, I guess 4.5 1-hour episodes would have seemed silly, but I don't know. Anyway, we have to wait till next week for episode 4, which is infuriating. But I really like this show. There have been some reviews where people are like, it's too slow, it's silly. You know, I don't want to watch a sitcom with Marvel characters. I want to watch Marvel characters. They don't seem to get what's going on, that this is building to a really sort of dramatic thing where Wanda's just going to lose her shit. I mean, she's kind of lost her shit, but she's keeping that at bay by existing in this fantasy world that she very obviously is in control of. And once she is forced to recognize that it's in the front of her mind as opposed to the back of her mind, that it's not real, when she's forced to confront that and deal with it and work through it psychologically and emotionally, there's going to be a big to-do, as they would say in my generation, to describe a situation where, or in the previous generation as well, to describe a situation where some shit's going to go down. It's going to be explosive, I think, and very consequential. So I don't understand why people don't see that that's what's coming. That some very rough times are ahead for these characters that are going to be exciting and scary. New episode next week. I will be back to review it. Until then, I once again say peace and long life.